Here's the thing, like for me, like part of that was sales, but like no one can sell you the way that you can sell you.
Yeah.
At least knowing that you're going to get for only
Nope.
commission based.
Yeah. No one will have that heart that you do.
Yeah. And like, even if they could learn your story so well, they're going to be missing the heart. And also you're probably not going to get that much talent for purely commission based on an offer that's not proven.
All right. How's it going, everybody? Xander Fryer, CEO and founder of High Impact Coaching, here with Mike Szczesniak. Mike, I'm really excited to dig in today with you. We're going to be talking everything from the last 4 years for you. I like to call you the 4-year overnight success. We're going to be digging into the details of how you got your coaching business up and running, and now to a point where you're bringing in around, I think you said around 18K, 20K in sales last month. So Mike, welcome to the show.
Dude, thanks for having me. I'm excited for this.
Absolutely, man. So before we dig into all the fun stuff around coaching, I think the first time that you and I met, it was actually, I was interviewing on your podcast.
Yep.
So if you want to give a bump for your podcast, now's the time, but I was interviewing on your podcast. And I was telling my story of leaving the world of IT to start my entrepreneurial business. So I'd love for you to give a little bit of a background around, your stint in the corporate world and what led you to leaving the corporate world and starting your coaching business.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, the Results Engine podcast on all platforms. Yeah, dude, it's what was really interesting to me about about interviewing you is, so we have a mutual friend, Chris Vasquez, shout out to Chris. And Chris was trying to connect us for a while. And I was looking at what you were doing. I'm like, Xander seems like a cool dude. Like, let me reach out, get him on the show. And I was blown away with how identical our stories were.
Yeah.
Because we come from a similar engineering world. We left at the same exact age and we built the same type of business. You just did a little bit better on like the peaks, right? Like, so you're making more in corporate and built the business faster. But I'll catch up. And that's what I was really, really kind of excited about. So Spark Notes, for people that don't know me and my story, I started my whole life revolved around where I could play soccer in college, right? Dumb lucked my way into an engineering school because back then all I wanted to do was make a lot of money, retire young, and open a pit bull rescue foundation. That was like really like what drove me. And for anyone that has ever gone through, as you can hear, my girlfriend's rescue dog walking around here. She just rescued a dog last week. But for anyone that knows the recruiting space, basically the flow was I would bring a list. I would go to these college showcases, bring that list of coaches to my guidance counselor, and he would basically be like, hey, these are the coaches that you should reach out to, right? Because for me, it was like parents were like, hey, by all means, go play soccer, but you're not going to do it. You're not going to go and get a garbage education, right? Just to go play D1, right? Yeah. Like you're going to use soccer as a tool to get a better education. And in one of those conversations, my guidance counselor was like, hey, you're good at math and sciences, look at engineering. Obviously my response was, cool, do they make a lot of money? And he's like, yep. I'm like, sign me up. And, fast forward 4 years, I kind of dumb lucked my way through getting a computer engineering degree, went down to Wall Street.
Dumb lucked my way through getting a computer engineering degree. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that before, by the way.
Well, dude, like every degree has their classes that just are the scary ones, right? And none of them scared me away, right? Yeah. And I ended up writing code for a living for six-ish years, 5 at my last company. Engineered order processing systems for like global luxury e-commerce down in Manhattan, and like the biggest fashion brands. And it was cool. I made a lot of money to like solve really cool problems. I worked with amazing people, but like to your question, why do you want to leave? It just wasn't what I was put on the earth to do. Like I knew that I wanted to do something bigger. So I was always starting companies while I was in that role. And I love that. The coaching and consulting was the 3rd company that I started in that space, and ultimately what I took full time. But it was just like, it wasn't this like, like the heavens open. It's like, you should quit. It was like kind of the plan the whole time. And it just took me 5 years to make the decision.
It took you a while to figure it out and make a decision. So you started the coaching business about 4 years ago, right?
Yeah.
But you went full time 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to me about that like 2-year period of in between and what that was like, and what it had to really get for you to be like, I'm going in, like I'm jumping in full steam here.
Yeah. So first of all, it was like half in, half out for the
Yeah.
majority of those 2 years, right? Like, I think an important piece for me is I had a hugely negative stigma around the coaching industry, which kept me from entering it for a number of years.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until, mainly because back then Instagram was big, but it wasn't as big as it is now. And I saw a bunch of like 17-year-olds with the words life coach in their Instagram bio. And I'm like, I didn't get coaching, right? Like, I came from the athletic world where the coaches had the answers. They told you what to do, right? Which is somewhat relevant in the business coaching world, but not in like the life coaching, high performance coaching type of thing. Like, we don't solve problems. We navigate conversations and help facilitate breakthrough. And I didn't get that. So I would look at it, I'm like, what the hell does this 17-year-old know about life? Like, I didn't get it, right? And that kept me back for a long time. But it wasn't until I met Brennan Burchard and talked to him at an event down in Ohio, and the words high performance just gave me permission to enter the space.
Yeah.
So on the flight home from that event, which anyone who knows like Ohio to New York, it's like an hour and a half. So you can imagine how much I was keyboard thrashing, but I wrote my first program on the flight home from that. And that first year and a half was just like trying to figure out what the hell I could do, right? Like, I didn't know what I was doing. I was like selling. I remember I sold it for like $97 for my first beta. And like, yeah, just wild. So it was a lot of that, like trying to figure out, like throwing stuff at the wall, figuring out what would stick, like had no support in terms of figuring out like how to actually operate a business and how to like do it successfully and like what I should have been charging. It just took me a long time to figure that out. And
when you're doing it the whole time, you're actually doing it like, you know, like you mentioned, half in, half out. You're like in the corporate world still. So you're not fully committed to it either, right? It's like, you're just trying to figure it out the whole time.
Yeah, it was the classic like Gary V side hustle, right? Like 5 to 7 a.m., 7 to 11 p.m., and then like selling the middle of my day to a big corporation.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Damn. So what led to the quit? What led to the I'm done?
50-foot telephone pole in torrential downpours in Fiji. About 48 feet up it, but that's actually a true story for anyone that's laughing and thinking I'm joking. But yeah, so like I mentioned, it was like I always wanted to. I never thought I would last more than 3 years in corporate, but like I was making good money. I was, you know, a single young dude living in Manhattan.
Burn, man. Like, you don't realize the longer you're there, the easier it is to stay.
Yeah, and like it was tough because I put this on my story the other day. I was like, be careful who you're getting your advice from, right? Because I was taking advice from people that, like, one, they didn't understand the engineering world. So they were looking at the numbers that we were making. And I'm sure you experienced this too. It's like, you're making how much by what age? But then you're comparing it to another role that like barely, like the industry is built on salaries that you don't make more than like barely over minimum wage, essentially, until you hit a certain level, and then you make FU money, right? So no one could understand why I would want to leave. So I think that kind of like pigeonholed me a little bit. And those people were giving me that advice because they loved me, but like
they just wanted you to be safe.
It wasn't good advice.
They wanted you to be safe. They want to see you okay. They don't want to see you die, basically.
Yeah, exactly. It was coming from a good place. It just was bad advice.
Yeah.
And you pair that with like actually making good money. Like I had all the stuff I thought I was supposed to want, right? Like 6-figure salary, senior title, luxury apartment on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, like all these things by like 24, 25 years old. I'm like, this is pretty dope. So that kind of allowed you kind of get a little complacent at that point. But to answer your question, I went down to the first big investment I ever made in myself was Tony Robbins Life and Wealth Mastery, Tony Robbins Mastery University. Life and Wealth was part of it, basically like a package of all of their events. And part of me went to that first Tony event because speaking is a big vehicle or a big like vertical for our business. And the speaker in me wanted to experience like one of the greatest speakers of all time, right? Like I needed to understand, like I wanted to be in that room when he had 13,000 people like experiencing any emotion that they needed to experience to best serve them in that part of the event at any point. And I'm like, I want to feel that. I want to experience what that's like and learn from it. That ended up to me like investing 10 grand, which was scary as hell. And I didn't know what I was going to get out of it, other than the fact that anyone that was willing to drop 10 G's to be in a room, I wanted to be in that room, because I had just turned 27.
Yeah.
And I was nowhere near goals that I had set for 25. Like I was in a funk at that point. And I went to it, and then ultimately ended up down in Fiji at his event.
One thing led to another. We ended up going to Fiji. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because it was a combination of all these different
so it included
events.
it. Yeah.
And so I was like, dude, like I want to do it big, right? Like life and wealth mastery. I need to go down there for that. And I went down to it, and part of it, everyone who knows Tony's stuff, they know like Unleash the Power Within, right? Like the fire walk.
Yeah.
Well, the pole climb is like the event, like the excursion type thing for life mastery.
Yeah.
And basically there's all these telephone poles. You climb up, they're 50 feet tall, and then you jump to a trapeze.
Yeah.
Right. And there's like a metaphorical element, of course. And for us, when we happened to do it, it was literally raining sideways.
Yeah.
I was coming off of my first powerlifting competition. So I weighed a decent amount. Right. And like, and as you're climbing this thing, like literally we went back under this hut because they're like, it's raining too much. We got to hold on. And then they're like, all right, Mike, are you ready? And I'm like, dude, it did not stop raining at all. It's still pouring.
It's still
pouring. And so we're climbing up, and basically there was some sort of like metaphorical experience there. Like, you know, I realized that 48 of the feet, like it took me 30 seconds to go up.
Yeah.
But then that last 2 steps, it took me a minute and a half. I had the whole thing on video, and I kind of realized like you hit a stride where you're making all this progress, right? And I think this is with anything. You make super fast progress, and then you hit the resistance, and the progress slows, but it doesn't mean that 1, you're not capable, or 2, like you're not surrounded by the people that can support you, right? And obviously like there's a harness on, right? And I realized that was the point where I was at in my business, where most people quit and they turn around, or rather the point where I was at without leaving corporate. And it was a combination
and really committing to it going forward.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I realized like 1, I was capable of getting those last 2 steps. Cause imagine this, dude, like I'm 6'5", right? I was powerlifting,
couple inches taller than I am.
Yeah. Like, and think about having to leverage yourself in those 2 feet on top. Cause you like literally climbed and stood on top of this pole. Yeah. And it's cut like at a shitty angle, like super wet. So very slippery. So I'm basically doing like a pistol squat and trying to get up that thing. It was tough. And I kind of realized like 1, I was capable, and 2, I had the support that I needed. Like it wasn't going to lift me up there, but as long as like, if I needed to like get some support, it was there to help me.
Yeah.
In the metaphorical sense, like that's the network we've built.
Yeah.
Right. You pair that with some BS money mindset breakthroughs that I had in that event. It's a whole different conversation. That led to me literally putting my notice in 6 days after getting back.
Yeah, dude, that's amazing. I love hearing that. Cause like, it really is like so many people, so many coaches that I can think of, like they want more, they want to be able to, you know, make more, have more free time, help more people. Right. Yeah. But every single person will hit a point. And it's that point, and it's like, this is the point that you either go for it, do the thing that scares the fuck out of you, or you go back down the pole.
Yep.
Right. Dude, I love that, man.
And dude, that's the thing, right? Because the question becomes like, okay, well, let's use the pole because it's a phenomenal example. What are your alternatives? Like either put in the work and take that leap, or climb all the way back down.
Yeah.
And not only is climbing all the way back down going to hurt your ego for all of your homies that are watching you right there, right? Like literally one of my really close friends to this day is from Australia. His name is Darren. In the video, he's the one who filmed me. And he's like, you can hear him and his mom screaming like, you're a king, like all this cool stuff. And they're like, whatever, like lingo that they had from where they grew up in Australia. But like, not only would that have hurt my ego from like having to, 1, that be on film, and 2, be in front of him, but 2, that's a lot more freaking work.
Yeah.
Like think about how much cooler it is to get on top and then get to jump into a trapeze. Like, pretty dope.
Just go for it.
Yeah.
Dude, I love that, man. So, you know, you finally make the commitment, you finally get to the top, the proverbial jump, right? You quit your job 6 days later. And of course, once you quit your job, then it's all daisies and rainbows, right? It makes it super easy to build your business. You just start scaling up instantly, right?
Of course. Yeah.
Talk to me. What's it like afterwards?
Um, Honestly, the weirdest thing for me was I was really blown away with how hard it was to find a routine
Yeah.
at first. Cause like, to give everybody context, freedom to me, like literally this is, I don't know what this says about me, but like, this is what freedom meant. It was being able to go to the gym during the day whenever I wanted,
Yeah.
like not have to do it at 5 a.m.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's what it was to me. And I'm like, this is the coolest thing ever. But I couldn't believe how long it took me to find a routine of like what actually worked.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's continuously evolving. But yeah, for me, that looked like I was working with some coaches at the time that one of them was my speaking coach, transitioned into becoming a business coach, and his partner as well. Um, and I learned a ton, but I wasn't ready to like receive it at that point. Like they had
Yeah.
great content, but like you have to be ready to receive something to really put it into
I think
work.
that's a really important thing for everybody to understand, right? It's like a lot of the time, it's not that the information or the content or the coaching isn't there. A lot of
Mhm.
the time, you're just not ready to accept it,
Yeah,
right?
100%,
Yeah.
100%. And I think the weird thing about my story is like obviously the big piece about me leaving corporate was before I left Fiji, I put 2 hours on my calendar for the day that I got back to really map out like what was the truth about my financial situation.
Yeah.
Like, because my thing was I needed to duplicate my engineering salary before I could leave, right? Which
Before
is
you could
just
leave. Yeah.
ridiculous. Like
Yep.
that's very freaking difficult to do in 5 to 7 a.m., 7 to 11
I
p.m.
was
every
gonna say
single
it's
night.
difficult to do like in a coaching business. It's even more difficult to do while you're still working your 9 to 5.
Yep. Yep. So my BS story was, oh, I have to hit that or I can't do it. It's like, well, is that true? So I put 2 hours on the calendar, which was really freaking difficult to do all those time translations. Like
Yeah.
I still don't understand. I went so far back in time that I crossed the date line and then it like became tomorrow. Like I couldn't wrap my head around getting to that part of the world. But I had XYZ number of months, right? I think it was like 6 or 7 months of money.
Yeah.
And then of course I end up at an event and that leads to me like feeling at home with this community. I'm like, I need to figure out how to join that mastermind. And it was like a multi 5-figure investment. I'm like, well, there goes half of my runway, like
Yeah.
sick.
Half of the 7 months is now gone. Yep.
Yeah. But then that's where I ultimately met Chris. Like the next year I re-enrolled and he joined. So here we are. So it was all worth it. Right. But I made some interesting decisions that on paper make 0 sense.
Yeah.
But like I felt like they were right.
Well, I think that's an important thing that I want to share with everybody right now who's listening. Like if you're just starting your coaching business out and you're trying to grow and scale to the impact and freedom that you truly want to have, and you're making all the logical decisions, I almost guarantee you're not going to get there. Right. Cause to be honest, right. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Mike, but like to be an entrepreneur, like coming from an engineer and an engineer, right? To be an entrepreneur, you have to be a little bit illogical.
Yep.
Like on paper, a majority of the decisions that I've made to lead me to this point, like the engineering me would be like, cannot compute, like it doesn't fit. Right.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I agree. I think the majority of what I've done does not make sense.
Yeah.
And I think that's also kind of like what has given me like an interesting edge in my sector of the coaching industry, because it's like high performance it's basically a flavor of life coaching in many ways, right? It's like
Yeah.
kind of like the woo woo part of the industry,
Yeah.
but like you approach it from a very engineering, and this is why I resonated so well with you and your story and what you guys do at HIC, Xander, is like you approach it from a very pragmatic way, right? But then there's also the athletic side of me. I was a goalkeeper in soccer. So anyone who understands that, like that was my license to be crazy, right? Like you need to have a couple screws loose if you're a goalkeeper in any sport, really, right? Like someone's kicking something at you for a living, right? And I think that intensity, like that's kind of been a big piece for me, like figuring out how to channel it into the gym and then into my journey in corporate and then into my business, like that work ethic. It allowed me to really approach things from that way that might not have made sense, but like doesn't care. I'll figure it out. Right. That intensity. But like you go back to that Tony Robbins event, like I asked one person for advice and it was my dad. And I didn't call my mom because she's the accountant. My dad's a lawyer, a private practice. So like he's at least self-employed, maybe not
Right.
entrepreneurial, but self-employed at least.
Yeah.
And he told me not to do it. Like he was like, I don't think it makes sense right now, but you got to do what makes sense for you. And I looked at it and I'm like, well, screw it. Like run
Yeah.
it, let's roll. Because I knew that I needed to make a change.
Yep.
Right. But like if we were going logic, I wouldn't have enrolled in HIC.
It's so funny you bring that up too, because I remember, and I talked about this on your podcast. Like when I quit, the first person I called up was my mom. Right. My mom's Pakistani. She like migrated from Pakistan to the US when she was 15 years old. Like she's one of my biggest inspirations. And I told her, I was like, I'm quitting. I'm doing this thing on my own. And like the woman that at that time, before obviously I'd met and married Maddie, like this is probably the most important woman in my life.
Yeah.
And she goes, I don't think you should do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was illogical. It just didn't make sense.
It was the same for me. Like
yeah.
The only reason, here's a fun fact. The only reason it was 6 days after I got back from Fiji that I gave my notice was because, so the first day of that event was my birthday.
Yeah.
So I was on another part of the world for my birthday. My sister and I share our birthday. We're 4 years apart, which is like ridiculous. And I wanted to go, I was going back that weekend to visit my folks and celebrate my birthday with my sister. Right. And the reason I waited 6 days is because I wanted to tell them what I was going to do and at least like include them. They weren't going to talk me out of it, but I wanted to include them. Right. And say, this is what I'm doing, not this is what I did.
Yeah.
And when I told my mom, because again, she's the accountant in the family, right? Like, she like very, very much believes in that structure that is corporate, but she knew that I was going to do it, right? It wasn't like completely blindsided her, but she looked like she saw a ghost when I told her. Like straight up looked like she saw a ghost.
Because she just, her baby boy throwing away his life. Like that's what she saw, right?
But here's what was cool is by the end of that conversation, she was like, you know what? Like it makes sense.
Yeah.
Like you should do that. And I don't know, I forget why I went down that path, but like it's because they love us. Like again, like this bad advice, it's bad advice nonetheless.
The bad advice is coming from a place
love.
of love.
Yeah.
But I think that's really important for us to understand, because especially as starting coaches, let's say we're starting coaches, we're not always around the best advice. We're around a lot of people that might give us advice, but it's a really good lesson. How many times, for everybody out there, how many times are you taking advice from somebody who is not necessarily exactly where you want to be? Right? Like you should really only be taking advice from somebody that is where you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And if they're not there, then you have to ask yourself, like, is this valid advice?
Yeah. And the only caveat I would add to that is like, are they where you want to be, or are they very well equipped to teach you a skill set that you need to develop?
That you need to get there. Yeah.
And like, that's it. Like, again, it doesn't mean that this bad advice is malicious. It just like, it's just not good advice because they're not coming from the place that we want to be. They're not thinking about it the way we want to think about it. Like, I don't know.
I love
it's
that,
an
man.
Interesting topic.
So so the next 2 years, talk to me the next 2 years. What were your biggest what was your biggest learning lesson and what was your biggest mistake? Actually, they might be one and the same, but what was your biggest learning lesson and what was your biggest mistake over the next 2 years?
That's freaking interesting. Biggest learning lesson. Okay, so I would say the biggest learning lesson was probably more recent, which is like, don't prematurely delegate. Like, don't delegate until you've mastered it, right? And it's like part of that's the E-Myth, part of that is getting on calls with you and getting like verbally bitch slapped into doing some things.
I would never verbally slap anyone.
Out of love,
especially someone who's probably got a good foot and height on me.
No, but it was the right decision, and that was like the catalyst for the growth recently.
Yeah.
But like I've always been trying to like find the balance between like creatively solving problems and like also like I guess that part of it's like kind of getting out of the stuff you don't want to do.
Yeah.
But you need to be able to do something before you can coach anyone else to do it or like
Yeah.
hire someone else to do it. And it wasn't until I got uncomfortable and did those things that we actually started seeing some solid results. So that would probably be it. The biggest lesson is don't prematurely delegate.
Yeah, I think that's huge too. Cause I think, I couldn't tell you how many times I hear a coach come into like the coaching space and be like, yeah, I just want to coach and I want somebody else to take care of marketing and sales for me. And they're imagining somebody else who loves to go market and sell just to handle that and they can just coach. But the reality is nobody will do that for you.
Yeah.
Like nobody, at least nobody will do it well. And how can you know if they do it well if you yourself don't know how to market and sell? Right. So it's like you have to master these things first before you can hand them off to anybody else.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Like, and here's the thing, like for me, like part of that was sales, but like no one can sell you the way that you can sell you.
Yeah.
At least knowing that you're going to get for only commission based.
Yeah. No one will have that heart that you do.
Yeah. And like, even if they could learn your story so well, they're going to be missing the heart. And also you're probably not going to get that much talent for purely commission based on an offer that's not proven.
Right? I think that's the biggest thing. If it's if you're already successful, if you're already making 7 figures, well, yeah, it's easy to get somebody else to sell for you.
Yeah.
Right?
The best salespeople will always take commission only if they know that they can sell it, but no one's going to take that bet. So
like an uncertain bet, an unproven coach, they're not going to take that unless they're also uncertain and unproven.
Yeah, exactly. And then you're just like, you're playing the lottery essentially with your business. Was that the other one? Like biggest failure?
Biggest mistake.
Biggest mistake. I mean, I could go on the same thing, but that's not too fun.
Yeah. Let's take something else.
Probably not. So there's 2 things. One thing I would say is, and I can't make this really a mistake because if I didn't do this, we wouldn't be on this call. But if one thing that I've been thinking a lot about early 2020, before you and I connected, before I enrolled in HIC and all the above, was I kind of wish that like I've invested in myself at an unreasonable level.
Yeah.
What I view unreasonable, right? Like at least for the current level that I'm at, and that will continue to grow, right? But like a pretty uncomfortable amount. And I've invested a lot in my network and all these things. And I felt that I had invested in my network before I invested in something like HIC that was like the exact blueprint. And part of that was because I hadn't found it yet. I didn't know someone who had done exactly what I wanted to do and could just tell me what to do and like kind of like hold my hand when I was like trying to bitch out of certain things, right? Or like
we just hadn't found that yet. Yeah,
I hadn't found it yet. So I can't really call that a mistake, but I did invest a ton in my network and I'm grateful for that, but it didn't yield the financial ROI. It built the relationship capital. And luckily I like somehow found a way to make that work financially, but like it made it very, very stressful. But if I didn't do that, we wouldn't be on this call because I wouldn't have met Chris and Chris wouldn't have been like, dude, shut up and hire Xander.
It's interesting because like I think about it and I think about a couple of the masterminds that I joined when I first started off, right?
Yeah.
And same thing. I invested an unreasonable amount in myself in the first 3 months when I wasn't bringing in any income. I invested like 35 grand in different programs in the first 3 months. And a lot of them built good relationships and, I got other aspects and it did get me around the right people. And like, one of my favorite things that I tell everybody is like, one of the programs that I joined, it was $12K and like the systems were outdated. The methodologies were outdated. The coaching was crap. Right. But in it, I met Craig Ballantyne, who ended up becoming one of my close friends and mentors to this day. And I ended up meeting a lot of entrepreneurs who over the last 4 years, they have actually grown in parallel with me. And they've gotten to 7-figure marks and things like that, even though, they were only down at the 6-figure marks and I was at virtually nothing. Right.
Yeah.
But at the time that mastermind made 0 cents. Yeah. Like it did not yield an ROI for me, but now like the ROI that it is currently yielding and the ROI that it will yield down the line, like this 12K mastermind that I deemed as the biggest failure of investment when I first started can actually be one of the best investments 4 or 5 years down the line. It's just
Yep.
sometimes you just don't know where those yields are going to come from.
Yeah, and you don't know what it's going to look like either. Like,
Yeah.
dude, the niche that I'm serving right now was entirely because of that mastermind.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I met Chris because of that mastermind. I gave a talk in San Diego. I guess it was about a year ago. Yeah, like just over a year ago. It was December of last year. My buddy Cole, who runs that group, he invited me to speak and do a training at that talk. And one of the guys in the mastermind that I hadn't met yet, because I had missed the first one, he saw that talk and he's like, dude, I need your help. And that became our first client in the door-to-door space. And then the results he got were stupid. He's like, I need you to work with some of my guys. And then it kind of just grew from there.
And then
now,
it's like, oh my God, this is it. Here it is.
It's our whole like clientele now. 98% of our clients are from the door-to-door industry.
Yeah.
Most of them in solar. And it's because of that, right? And I didn't know what that was going to look like. Like, it was only one client that I generated from the group that wasn't going to cover the investment of the group.
But it honed in.
It became my business.
It honed in what you were actually focusing on in your business moving forward. I love that.
Yeah.
Cool. So we're running short on time here, Mike. So I got a couple quick last questions for you.
Cool.
First one is, what's the big goal for 2021 for you?
Dude, that's something that I think I'm still fine tuning the exact details. I've been thinking very short term through Q4 to really build the foundation for what 2021 is going to become. But I think like continuing to build that consistency, right? Like raising that baseline of what's duplicatable. What do I know I'm going to create month over month so that I can continue to build, and increasing that number of enrollments is a big focus. I think like I could throw out numbers of dollar signs and stuff like that, but I think that's the big thing. Is consistency is the most important word to me right now.
Yeah. And I think that's really important in the coaching space. You know, I've seen a lot of coaches that they'll go have a 10K month, or they'll go have a 20K month, but then they'll drop back down. Right. It's like,
I'm not interested in that.
We're not interested in that. Like, what can I do consistently, sustainably, and profitably so that I can actually scale up? Right.
Yeah.
So the next question for you is, what is the biggest thing you need to focus on to actually make that happen?
Well, that's interesting, because like the consistency is like my consistency, right? So it's continuing to improve how powerfully I'm showing up and how I'm sticking to my time blocks, knowing that I've set them intentionally. Because at this point, like, I know what leads to those results. It's just the stuff that sucks that I tried to delegate, right?
You just got to do it.
I just got to do it until that becomes a no-brainer, and then I need to replace myself. Yeah. And it's the same word, just like a different tweak on it.
I love it, man. Last question for you. Who's been obviously, I know the answer is me, your favorite person that you've ever interviewed before. But besides me on the results engine, who's your favorite person that you've ever interviewed?
It's an unfair question, dude. I
don't like to ask fair questions. You know that.
I've been very blessed to connect with just some absolute like world shakers.
Yeah.
And the name that's popping up to me right now is Tim Story. That was one of the early interviews. I think it was like episode 20. It was one of the first interviews that I did. And I walked away from it just feeling so grateful. I think it's also top of mind because I'm going to be sitting down with him at this event I'm speaking at in January to do round 2. But awesome. Tim is just such a cool dude. And if I had to pick someone, that's top of mind, I guess.
That's amazing, man. I love it, brother. Beautiful, boss. Where can people learn more about you and the results engine, Mike?
Best place is just Instagram at Mike Szczesniak. You probably got to link that up because there's a lot of Polish Z's, but that's the major platform for us. And I answer all my DMs, all that sort of stuff.
Perfect. Awesome.
Happy to help.
Thank you, man. Beautiful.
Appreciate you, bro.
Appreciate you too, man. For everybody out there who's listening to this in podcast land, if you want to catch these interviews live, go to xanderfryer.com/FB group. And for anybody else out there that is ready to take their love for coaching and helping people full-time in 2021, make sure to go to xanderfryer.com/programs. Check out our programs. We'll see if we can help you get to that next level. Thanks again, Mike.